And we talked about the Becoming documentary, but tonight we are shifting our attention to focus on the book. And I am just pleased to do that with some fabulous women of color leaders. But about myself, just briefly, because I'll be participating in the conversation tonight. I am, again, the visionary founder of Leadership Links Incorporated. I'm also an IVP author, InterVarsity Press, and InterVarsity Press is the sponsor of this evening's event. So I'm going to share briefly about them because they are offering some wonderful gifts to our participants on this evening. So InterVarsity Press, they are committed to publishing Christian books for more than 70 years, and they are really an extension of the InterVarsity Press student fellowship or campus ministries. And what I love about InterVarsity is their commitment to strengthen the church, to encourage individuals, and to shape the academy. InterVarsity Press is also very passionate, I would say, about lifting the voice of women and people of color, and you're going to see that with some of the other authors that are featured on tonight's discussion. And you're going to also see that in some of the materials that they provided to share with us this evening. So we want to thank InterVarsity Press for partnering with us tonight. Additionally, they've done something very cool. They've allowed us to put together a customized bookstore for tonight's event. So we've collected some resources from InterVarsity Press that is really in alignment with our mission and or the type of authors that we want to support and get behind. And so they've created a customized bookstore just for us. And if you order from that customized bookstore, you will get a 40% off discount with the code that they're providing this evening. So you want to use the website that's provided both on the presentation, but also in the comment and chat boxes to access that. Tonight, I also get to introduce you to some of my really cool friends. They got a giveaway. Let me tell you about that real quick. So the giveaway, the way you can enter if you haven't yet. So if you registered, you will get the dial-in information. And when you get the dial-in information, you will also get the giveaway information. And so you got that early. But for those who are just joining us this evening, we're providing the link for the giveaway. It's not too late to enter that. You can go ahead and do that now. So I wanted to remind you of that. This is your chance to enter the giveaway tonight by following all of our authors, as well as the nonprofit and InterVarsity Press, and also tweeting to let everyone know and inviting them to join the conversation with us this evening. Now, I want to introduce you to my dear friend, Miss Kathy Kahn. Kathy is joining us tonight from Chicago. She is an InterVarsity Press author, the author of Raise Your Voice, Why We Stay Silent and How to Speak Up. She's also a contributor to Sojourners Magazine and a co-author of More Than Serving Tea. She's a contributing author of the forthcoming Alabaster Guided Meditations on the Psalms, Volume 1 and 2, which will be published later this year. And she is the vice chair of the board for Evangelicals for Social Action, which is a nonprofit located in DC. So Kathy writes a lot. She is an advocate. I love her, how she raises her voice. And she has a Bachelor's of Science degree in journalism from Northwestern University. And she's a mom, a wife, a mom of 3 adult children. Kathy, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Natasha. You know I'm here because of you.
Do you have your video on? I want people to see your face real quick if they can.
I do have my video on, so.
Okay. Well, hopefully they can see you, but if not, they'll be able to see you real soon. Thank you so much for joining us, friend. And then we have Miss Christy Garza Robinson, who is a Latina minister, activist, co-author of Hermanas, Deepening Your Identity and Growing Our Influence. She is currently living in Austin, Texas with her husband, Eric, and their 2 beautiful daughters. She is passionate about advocating for those on the margins and seeking to help people. Oh, and let me show you Chrissy so you can see her. You can get there you go. That's a beautiful face in a book cover with her name. So she's passionate about this work of advocacy, helping people to integrate all of who they are and their calling, especially concerning their ethnic identity. And she enjoys good food, Yes, ma'am. Good friends and deep conversations. She has a master's in global leadership from Fuller Seminary. Welcome, Christy.
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I'm excited to be here with you.
So glad you're here. So glad. And then next up this evening, we have with us Representative Ruth Anna Buffalo. She is a citizen of Mandan, Hadassah in the the Arikara, the nation, the MHA nation. She's originally from Mandaree, and she currently resides in South Fargo with her husband and 4 children. She was elected in 2018 and is serving a 4-year term representing District 27 in the North Dakota House of Representatives. Welcome, Representative Buffalo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm glad you're here. Okay, so before we get started in the conversation tonight, I'm going to share briefly about our nonprofit organization. And the first way I'm going to do that is to show just a short organizational video.
In August of 2015, Leadership Links established itself as a nonprofit organization. From what began as a yearning desire to encourage, equip, and mentor both aspiring and practicing leaders, would flourish into community building, mentorship, and spiritual enrichment. Driven by its mission to offer leadership education that facilitates impactful living, character, and spiritual development, Leadership Links guides others in developing and refining their best selves.
It's important for her to be around like-minded individuals where she can feel free to express herself and not feel uncomfortable about being a leader. And I just appreciate everything that this program has done for my daughter.
Dedicated to connecting people with purpose, Leadership Links delivers leadership training, conducts summer programs, hosts networking events, and establishes impactful mentoring relationships to slingshot people towards their goals. Making an impact on those around you is inevitable, especially when giving the right combination of love, inspiration, a strong network, knowledge, and a heart to serve. This is who we are. It's what we do. It's why we exist.
With inspiration, Leadership Links taught me how to be confident and when I take a different path than other people. And I actually found out that I inspire others when I go my own way in life. I love to volunteer in my community, and Leadership Links has helped me and connected me to other volunteer services.
We believe that this was ordained by God. We are in partnership with some wonderful people who really have a passion and a thirst to see the youth in our community reach their dreams, walk in their purpose, and to really grow and to fulfill their potential.
Here we're able to express ourselves freely in the no judgment zone. We're able to share ideas and be able to bounce ideas off of one another to not only make ourselves succeed, but others as well.
Grounded by desire to serve, its founding board members are all military veterans who find that service is just as important, in or out of uniform.
It's about all of us pushing ourselves to give our very best of what all of us have to offer to make our children better and to help their dreams to come true.
God is the one who created us in His image and for a purpose. And in knowing Him, our Links leaders can walk in purpose and learn how to love others well.
Sometimes it appears that there are plenty of reasons to feel doubtful about humanity, but there is a light. There are people devoted to helping others, teaching others, and believing in others. Be a part of the good going on in the world. Join the network, provide support, lend your time, change a life, link up.
We thank you so much again for joining us this evening. You can find that organizational video on our YouTube channel and as well as on our website. So a little bit just about Leadership Links. We are a network of leaders, and our desire is to equip and educate servant leaders who are purpose and committed to using their goods and resources for the greater good of humanity. We do that by offering leadership education that facilitates impactful living, character, and spiritual development. And we're just glad that we have the opportunity to do that, even in the midst of what's going on in our country and our world right now. In spite of all of that, we are still very much committed to strengthening our Links network, which is a multi-generational and multi-ethnic network, as well as intentionally investing in the next generation of leaders. And so with that being said, let's get started for tonight's discussion. I'm going to invite you to join us. And as we welcome our friends, there we are. Welcome, 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 welcome. They're the beautiful faces. So I guess we didn't do our becoming me section. So I will let you all do your becoming me introductions. We'll start with you, Kathy.
So I'm Kathy Kong, and I am becoming more grounded.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Miss Christy.
Yes, I'm Christy Garza Robinson, and I'm becoming more decolonized.
Ooh. I wasn't ready, but I'm ready now. Okay. Representative Buffalo.
I'm Ruth Buffalo, and I'm becoming more stronger.
Okay. Okay. So I am Natasha, and I think I'm becoming more brave. So I'm going to ask the first two questions to all of us because I think it'll be good to set the stage for tonight's conversation, and I think it'll be good for people to really get to understand who we are and what's the basis for the things that we bring to the discussion in tonight's conversation. So the first thing I want to bring up, First Lady Michelle Obama is not just a woman of color, she's an African-American woman. And this is a woman who was leading in her own right before she married the guy that would become President Barack Obama. And so we're going to talk more about that next week. This week, we're going to focus our attention on her first section of the book, Becoming Me. And so she's writing from her social location as not just a leader, which is something we talk about all the time here at Leadership Links, but as a leader who is also Black and a woman. So at the beginning of the book, she says, stepping into public life, I've been held up as the most powerful woman in the world and taken down as an angry Black woman. I've wanted to ask my distractors which part of that phrase matters to them most. Is it angry or Black or woman? So my question to all of us, I'll be joining in this conversation tonight, is what has your personal and professional experience been like as a woman of color who leads in public spaces? Whoever wants to go first, jump right in. Chrissy, you the one becoming more decolonized, so you go first.
I'm doing it, okay. It's aspirational and becoming, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience in my personal and professional life as a woman of color. So yes, I'm a woman of color, but I have a strong proximity to whiteness. So I feel like as I'm growing in my identity, I'm learning that as a mestizaje, as a Mexican American woman, I come with the colonized and the colonizer in myself. And so depending on my context, professionally or personally, I bring different parts of that. And I've had some wonderful mentors that have helped along the way with that too. So that's obviously super significant. It's not been easy. It's been difficult as a woman of color in my professional life. I've served in predominantly white evangelical organizations. And yeah, to be able to step into my own and also steward my privilege well in different contexts has been I don't know that I'd say like I've arrived somewhere, but that's the journey I'm on with the process. And yeah, I feel like I couldn't have done it without community, my journey professionally, without people helping me along the way, helping me find my voice, reading Kathy Kong's book. And
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so it's been a mixed bag. It's both some incredible experiences leading within my own community, within the Latino community, but then also leading in predominantly white spaces has been challenging.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your honesty and vulnerability in that. Who's next? Raise your voice, Miss Kathy.
Being a leader and a woman of color in those spaces has been, like Christy said, like some of the most important formation moments and extremely challenging. So I would say, you know, reading First Lady Michelle Obama's words about being seen as an angry Black woman really hit me hard. I still remember a performance review that came back and the words that were used to describe me, abrasive. And that one, like, I cannot forget that. Being a woman of color in leadership has always meant being looked at through a white gaze and being compared to what they thought I should be. And in that space, trying to figure out, well, who am I really? Who has God really created me to be? And I'll be 50 this year, and there are still moments where I feel like I'm still figuring that out. And so I would say being a woman of color in leadership means being humble and open to learning about myself and stepping away from what other people think I should be, like abrasive.
Yeah. I'm abrasive too, apparently. Is it like a common woman of color thing? We're all just are we labeled that? I don't know.
Yeah,
out there.
Yeah.
It's on you, Ruth. What you got?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in general, as women, we're oftentimes, I think of like Lisa Leslie, the WNBA star who caught a lot of slack for her showing emotion during competition. And I'm a former athlete as well. And so I see a lot of nuances there where women are viewed as angry if we are standing up for ourselves and speaking our truths. And it's almost as though it's intentionally there, that word of calling us angry is to discredit us or to silence us back into conforming or getting back in line or to sit back down. And so it's something that I've been used to experiencing at a very young age, you know, being the only Native American oftentimes in the classroom from, since 8th grade actually, and then all through high school college got a little bit more diverse, but yeah, but you still never really get used to it in a sense, you know, because you're human and you have feelings and you want to be treated with respect just like the next person, but it is a complex thing to navigate being an Indigenous woman in a leadership role. Because you kind of get it from all angles as far as some slack or negativity where like maybe from within my community, people might view me as being privileged because I'm an elected official now. But on the flip side, I don't see any privilege at all, you know, because I'm still the only Native American woman serving in our state legislature. And so there's some challenges there, but I'm thankful, you know, to be alive and to occupy that space. But so yeah, I'll talk more about it throughout this segment.
Yeah, and I'll share just briefly because I'm going to share more of my story during our book discussion next month with Sojourner's Truth. But I'll say this: I remember going to the Naval Academy as a college student and then graduating from the Naval Academy and serving as an officer in the Marine Corps. So I did 6 years in the Marine Corps. So if you count the time from my military training to the time I got out of the Marine Corps, I spent 11 years of my adult life in a military environment that was predominantly white, predominantly male, and not just male, but a certain type of male, right? And I found in that is that sometimes when I would assert myself or I would speak up for myself, I would speak up for someone else, then there was this stigma that not a lot of people said angry, but I'm sure there might have been some of that behind closed doors, but there was this thing of I could be difficult, or I can have it my way or the highway, that type of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been in this situation for more than a decade, and I'm doing what a leader does in this environment if they're going to get the mission accomplished, and if there's going to have any type of respect in the space, right? Because that was just the reality of the situation. And the reality was that I was doing a lot of the same things that if a male was doing it, that he would be rewarded for. He would be called a great Marine. He would be called a great officer, but it's because of my skin color and my gender that somehow it gets a negative stigma. And so that's just the reality of my situation. So tell us a little, so that's a professional thing of what happens in perception on the outside. Share a little bit, as much as you would like, with our audience about your personal story, because Michelle Obama, she wrote that your story is what you have, what you will always have. It's something that you own. And she talked about this in the documentary too, about she wants more people telling her story. I write about this in my book. I think it's important for people of color and women of color, and certainly women of color who are leaders, for more people to hear our story. So can you briefly tell us your story? All right, Representative, you go first now.
Sure, yeah. So what comes to mind, I think, is the differences in experiences. You know, there was a discussion that came up just recently regarding the flooding of like 94% of our agricultural land on the western side of the state within our Indian reservation. And that's where I grew up. And I'm currently serving on the eastern side of the state in South Fargo. But just the difference in experiences where so for example, my family history includes some trauma, you know, with, for example, that the flooding of 94% of our agricultural land really impacted my family. So much that I think it would be interesting to see if there were to be a study out there, you know, in the future on the impacts of what do they call it? The years of life lost, you know, premature death, or people who die way before their time. And so I think of my grandparents, because they had passed away, you know, a year before I was born. My grandma Ruth, who I'm named after, and I carry her Hidatsa name. She passed away a year before I was born, and then my grandpa passed away 6 months before I was born. And so I never got to meet them, but I still feel, looking back on it, my mom really, even our culture within the Hidatsa Mandan Rikrad Nation, MHA or 3 affiliated, we have support systems in place that are basically extended family. And so looking back on my childhood, I was always with grandmas, you know, not my, more like surrogate grandmas, but it was really, when you look at the systems in place, they're really rich. And I'm thankful that our ancestors put these systems and structures in place because they really help today. So for example, my grandparents passed away before I was born, but I still had a lot of nurture and love from the community. So I was always around older people, grandmas. And so I think of today, where there was a discussion this past week regarding the flood, and someone pointed out that, you know, white people lost land during that flood as well, you know, and okay, rightfully so. You know, many of our Indian reservations are what they call checkerboard, where from one way or another, people had ended up chose to sell their land, or there were systems in place that they unfortunately lost their land or to pay off a debt or something. But in high school, I distinctly remember looking at a court document that my mom gave me that shared exactly something that contributed really in a huge way of my story, was that, my grandpa changed our last name to a more English sounding last name after the flood, because he tried to find work off of the reservation, and he was met with challenges because he was a very dark-skinned Native American man. And so, I'll never forget seeing the court document that said, last name changed for socioeconomic reasons. And so when people say, well, it wasn't only natives that were impacted by that flood, it was white people. But I challenge people to dig a little bit deeper in their understanding and compassion to understand the true and real history that occurred, because our family was directly impacted by that. And many people relocated and chose to leave and move to different places of the country, California, Ohio, Minneapolis, larger urban cities. So I just think of my upbringing and how a lot of my stories of my grandparents and their wisdom has also shaped who I am today. And
let me ask you a question. What was your family name before the change? And then is Buffalo the name that it was changed to?
No, Buffalo is the original name, which came from a man his name was Buffalo Punch. And then down the family tree, it was George Buffalo, and then Theodore Joseph Buffalo, my grandpa. And then the English name was Bowman, or is Bowman.
So your grandfather changed it from Buffalo to what?
Bowman.
And then you decided, who decided in the family that we're going to reclaim our name?
My mom. Yep. When I was 19, and so I followed suit and changed my name back then to just kind of give respect to who I grew up with. I grew up in the Northern Plains with my mom's people. My dad, he was in the Air Force and from Texas, but stationed in Minot, North Dakota. And that's how he had met my mom, through the rodeo. Like, they were both into horses and things. So, and so I was raised by a single mom. And so that was kind of why I chose to change my name when I was 19 too, to kind of honor my mom and her family's history.
Thank you so much for sharing that. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna ask the next question because it picks up where she left off. Because one of the things, I'm in a doctorate program right now. And so we're doing a lot of reading about racial justice and systemic injustice. And one of the things that I've been reading about is the different ethne or different cultural aspects that we have to, as people of color, give up to become white. So I want to ask you, Kathy, to share your story as part of response to that. So one of the things that Miss Michelle Obama wrote about is, she said, speaking a certain way, the white way, as some would have it, was perceived as betrayal, as being uppity, as somehow denying our culture. And so my question for you is, how has some of those myths and stereotypes of what it means to be white shaped or informed you as a leader? And I'm sure you can weave your story somewhere into that.
Yeah, so it is definitely tied into language, right? And similarly to Ruth, the experience of naming is a part of that, right? So I'm introduced and known as Kathy Kang, but that's actually not my name. And it's changed to be acceptable and to be Western, to be American, to be white. So my given name is Kang Kyung-ah. And Kang is our family name. And in the Korean tradition, the family name comes first and always. And then it's your individual name that has like a generational marker. And my name is also written in both the Korean language and in the Chinese language, in Chinese characters, because Korea was colonized by the Chinese. So, right, there's this rich history that gets lost. And Kathy means pure, but Kyung-ah means congratulations. And that's significant because in a patriarchal culture, to have been named by my paternal grandfather, congratulations, means something, because I was the first girl born in his family line for 4 generations. And so that gets lost when we come to the US and my parents give me this American name so that it'll be easy for me when I go to school. And that sets off this whole chain reaction of, even though growing up, my first and only language was Korean, when I start school and can't manage, I am put into ESL, and that doesn't last very long because they only have ESL for Spanish speaking kids. And there is a process of unlearning language, which is so tied to culture, and learning English. And I think growing up as a child, a little bit of shame in trying to learn language, and then have parents who are also adults, but are learning to speak fluently a language that isn't their primary. And so what that I try to go back to as a lesson in my leadership is to have some empathy. And that leadership is not white male and well-spoken and college educated with lots of degrees and letters. It is very much leadership of a family, of a father who was a busboy for his first job in the United States and rode a bicycle because we couldn't get a car. That's leadership, right? That is making a way, and it's making a way, not the American dream. It's making a way and being resourceful, but also knowing deep down inside who he was, right? To eventually say, I am an engineer. And if it means going in as a factory worker to eventually be an engineer, I will. And again, I think specifically as a Korean American woman, in my leadership, I am still working out what it means to be fully bicultural, and to say it isn't broken Korean, but that I speak a blend of Korean and English, that it isn't that I am so well spoken, but that I have had the investment of mentors in multiple communities helping me learn how to code switch.
Because that's a thing. It's a thing. Code switching is a thing. And you know, and what I love about what you're sharing, what both of you shared, and Chrissy, I'm gonna come to you in a minute, is that what I think some people who don't have these, I will call them multi-layered cultural experiences, right? And I would say there's a gift and privilege to having those experiences too, because there are ways that you're educated and challenged that perhaps people who don't have those experiences are not educated or challenged. But one of the things Michelle Obama wrote about, and I resonated with deeply, she said, when she was talking about her father, who grew up in an era where, as a Black man, he didn't have a lot of choices and a lot of options. And so she said he always viewed rich people with a shade of suspicion. She said he didn't like people who were uppity, and he had mixed feelings about home ownership in general. And so it's just very interesting to me. And I can share, like, briefly, one of my examples and experiences. My father was a roofing contractor, a contractor by trade. So he's always been a blue collar worker, my father who raised me. And once I went to not just college, but that particular college, and college, by the way, was something that my parents encouraged me to do. They were supportive of me to do. They wanted it so bad for me. They're so proud that I did it. But then you get on the other side of it, and it puts you into a different environment, a different cultural and social circle. And so what I found, that the social circles that I was now being invited into made my father very uncomfortable. And so there were years where he didn't really come and visit our family. He didn't come in, and there was a perception in his mind that because I was now in relationship with certain people, I would say maybe people of a different social class or white people, that somehow I was thinking less of him. right? So this internalized racism of not only how people see you, but how you start to see yourself based on, that. And the thing is, I never, no ma'am, Master Kathy, she said, no ma'am, because there's some, but I think Kathy would just ask me a question about whether I was in a certain social club. And I was like, no, my family wasn't privileged to be in those type of social clubs. We didn't have the money, right? We didn't have that. And so to come on the other side of that and be invited into different spaces, what I'm saying is that impacts our families. If the systems, even though, we can be the anomaly or we can get, the thing that they want for us, but it doesn't always change how the people that we are in relationship with then view the other people in our family or our communities. And the people in our families know that, right? And so we have to deal and wrestle with that tension too, even as a part of our leadership. And so that's just, a interesting thing. So I'll ask you, Chrissy, you could weave your story into this. How has this tension impacted your relationship and understanding your own family and culture?
Yeah, I think so. I'm from South Texas, which is right on the border between Texas and Mexico. So that's home for me, which is a very blended space, dominant white culture, but it's majority Latino. And so growing up in a place where you're constantly navigating two languages, you're constantly navigating multiple cultures, I think it was very normal to engage both and live in both. Like I remember a story, my dad worked in local politics and was a businessman in the Valley. And when he would go to Mexico to do business work, he would wear a suit and tie and wear his like really nice watch. Because now I know, because there was a way that he was perceived differently based on the way that he looked, and the power dynamics but when he would go to a business meeting here in the States, just a few miles across the border, the bridge, he would have like his sleeves rolled up and much more casual, approachable, because of how power is perceived in the US. And so I grew up around that. It felt very natural, very normal. And the identity of a Mexican-American person is one of mixing. It's one of living in two worlds all the time. So I used to say that like liminality is actually my home plate, which has struggle and tension in it. But I think, yeah, it's definitely dislocating coming to faith in a predominantly white space. So I grew up Catholic, which is predominantly Latino in the Valley. And then I came to faith in a community that was very different. I was the only one with a last name like mine in our church. I was the only non-white person I ever saw get baptized in that community. So it was just a very strange, and in a strange, not the most healthy way, mixed my ethnic identity separate from my faith in a way that I've had to work to bring back together. So that's been a part of the decolonizing work I talk about, is learning that I came to faith in a specific cultural context that wasn't my home plate. And so that was really important for me to reconnect to that. And my family talks about that too. They're like, we knew that when you started going to that white church, you weren't around anymore. We didn't see you. You didn't come to our gatherings. It was like a whole new world. And I disappeared into it for a really long time. And so I think a part of my growth has been reconnecting with my space and my people. My grandparents were both in farming, agriculture. They were ranchers and farmers in Mexico. My grandfather was poor and was a sharecropper in East Texas. And so they worked land, but it wasn't their land when they came to the US. So I think that's a part of our story too. And is a part of me needing to, or having an ache in me to always find more rootedness and groundedness in these, when you're living in two worlds all the time. And I've just learned to live with it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Kathy was just posting in the chat box. It's like, and it's exhausting. I mean, that's the truth, right? It's exhausting to navigate that, having to navigate that all the time. And even the people who you love in your culture or your community or your family, perceiving you in a different way, or not understanding your choices, or feeling like there's a disconnect, or somehow you don't honor them or love them the same, or respect them in the same way because of proximity to white people. And so I think there's a lot to unpack there. Kathy, I'm coming to you. How did you learn, as we are learning all these things we're talking about, and there are various layers to our experience, how did you learn to find your voice? And specifically, I want to ask, because we do leadership education here, how can women of color and girls who are leaders learn to do the same?
I like to tell people, be ready to make lots of mistakes. And that, I think, is one of the hardest lessons to learn, is the cost of a mistake can feel so high for us as girls of color and women of color, right? Because oftentimes the thing that we're doing, we're one of the few, if not the only. And so making a mistake feels like not only are we letting down our community, but that maybe that means no one else will have the chance. And what I've found is that as a Christian, I can't live in a world that says God's economy is limited to one chance, and that God's opportunity for me to discover and grow into my leadership means one chance. So when I look at scripture, I see lots of failure. Lots of failure. And
most of them by men, though.
Yes, true. But that's also because who wrote down the scriptures? The men who are taught how to write. So, if we go all the way back, I bet there'd be some amazing stories.
Yeah.
But I even, I write about it in my book. I think I love the story of Esther, one, because there's a little bit of that stereotypical female thing of like, in the end, the thing she does is she invites the king and his sidekick to dinner, right? So there's something really stereotypically feminine woman hospitality thing about that. But there's also in that first dinner, she doesn't do the big ask. And I feel like it can look like a mistake, like she missed her one chance to like get it right. And she does it again, right? She kind of warms up and figures out what needs to happen and then invites them back. And so I look at that and think, we're going to make mistakes, especially if we've got any young girls, young women out there, you're going to make mistakes, and some of them are going to feel really hard. And they will feel like failures. And that is okay. That is okay.
Yeah. I got a question for you, Chrissy, but Kathy, girl, I think this is a good opportunity, because one thing we do at Leadership Links is that we value men and women leading and partnering together. And I think just in that example with Esther, because that book is burning in me right now. That's coming. That book is coming, right? It's been in me for years, and so it's coming. And I know Christy, that's one of the things that they've written about in their book. So maybe you can bring this back around in your response as well. But I see in the invitation to dinner, not just hospitality and not just a typical woman thing. I see a strategist.
Yeah.
Right. I see a strategist. I see someone playing to her strengths as a leader. Right.
Yeah.
And betting on the favor that she has already gained with the king. And so there are all kind of ways that women lead, but because it doesn't look the way that men lead, we don't always consider it as leadership. Right. And so I think that's very, very important. But I love what you say about failure. So Michelle Obama wrote in her book that failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual result. It's vulnerability that bleeds with self-doubt, and then is escalated, often deliberately, by fear. So Christy, how do you as a leader deal with those moments of failure?
Yeah, I write some about this because I think with the background and story that we have in our family of starting out as migrant farm workers, and then my dad taking a step towards the middle class, and me being the first to go to college in our family, there's a lot of perseverance and endurance that comes along with a vision of success. And so like failure is not an option because our family needs to keep moving forward. And in Latino culture, we're told that we need to aguantar, like we just need to push through, like persevere, keep it going, you know? And so failure is perceived as like a weakness, something that, you know, that's not in us. We're strong, we know what we're doing, we're moving forward. And so becoming more comfortable with weakness, with failure, with humanity, like it's not possible to not make mistakes, to not fail. Like that's too much of a burden to put, especially when you're coming from immigrant communities or immigrant family, to feel like I have to like nail it. I can't make a mistake. I can't blow it. It's like, goodness gracious, the weight of that is too much. And so I've had to learn to experience more liberation in the sense of white people, I feel like they fail a lot and they're cool with it. Like, it doesn't bother them. And I used to, like, when I was doing college Latino ministry, I would tell my husband a lot, he's a white man, white cis het man. That I felt like for white students, they had like this safety net when they would fail. Like, let's say they like failed their first semester. Well, their parents could like foot the bill when they lost their scholarship, or they just had more opportunities to fail and it wouldn't crash them. Where I would have Latino students that's like, you didn't know what you were doing when you showed up. You got F's in your classes and now you're headed home because you lost your scholarship and you're done. And so it just felt like the consequences were more severe, which like influenced that sense of like, you can't make a mistake. You have to want that, like you have to get through it. And so I think it's been a struggle to learn, like there's beauty in being human and recognizing failure is a part of the journey. And you see it throughout the scriptures. We can name a million stories, novellas, that's what we would call it in Mexican American culture, the novellas of Dios, is what we used to call it. These like drama stories in the scriptures of people totally blowing it, and to let ourselves experience that too and not feel that burden that I think is too much. Does that make sense?
It makes plenty of sense. And I think that gives us a chance to talk a little bit about identity, because my contribution to this part of the discussion is, especially early on, so I've been in very diverse Christian contexts throughout my life. I've always been in the church, let's say that. I haven't always been a Christian, but I've always been in the church. And so there are different church environments that shape you and form you in different ways. And so, you know, part of our mission at Leadership Links is spiritual development. And so we want to develop the leader holistically, because we see what happens when we have leaders that have no character or no moral compass. So what we do here is that we develop leaders holistically. And I remember, you know, there were seasons when I was in predominantly white churches or predominantly white spaces. And it was first in those spaces where I heard statements like, well, you are Christian before you are Black. Right? Like Christianity is more important. Your relationship and your identity in Christ is more important than your identity as a Black person, right? And I'm just going to tell you, I never bought into it because I was raised in a community that, you know, I just understood that my Blackness was not something to be ashamed of. It was something that was given to me by God. It was purposeful, and I didn't have to make a choice, right? And so it's interesting because I think for the first time in our time frame, in our history, where we are challenging white people to say that your identity in Christ, right, Christians and white evangelicals in particular, that your identity in Christ is more important than your allegiance to your whiteness, right? And so I think, you know, when we're talking, Ruthie, I think it would be good. What has it been like for the tension or the discomfort or the challenge you have with the spaces you're in and the various people you work with and where you're actually from?
Well, I think, you know, my current role as an elected official and being affiliated with a certain political party, oftentimes the political party that I'm affiliated with is referred to as, in a negative way, as, for example, playing identity politics, and so that to me really hasn't ever made sense, because it's almost, again, how I'm interpreting it. And I consider myself a fairly new person to the political arena, even though I was birthed into a very complex political relationship with the federal government, being an Indigenous woman and a member of a federally recognized tribe or tribal nation. But I always try to challenge that way of thinking, back to the identity politics, because I feel, again, that, or believe that, is another way to silence people and to diminish who they are. And I think back to like the founding of our country, and a lot of times there's a common themes there that are based in fear. And so oftentimes I think it's just that rhetoric is coming from a place of fear. And so I always want to challenge that way of thinking and to encourage people to be proud of who they are. And it's not playing into the identity politics, it's who you are, it's your way of life, and that should be celebrated. And so that's been my perspective, or is my perspective. And as I navigate these spaces as an elected official in North Dakota, just my presence alone, I think, has been interesting to see the reception. To begin with, in North Dakota, we have a very low representation in our state legislature for women, so I'm already kind of grouped into that deficit, I guess you could say. So, there's more challenges there, but I still carry with me my upbringing and being proud of who I am and where I come from. And so when I was sworn into office, I chose to wear my tribal regalia. And that dress I wore has significance to it. It's a replica of my grandma Ruth's, one of her dresses, but hers was original elk teeth, and the border was beaded. So hers was much more elegant and, just very special. And so mine was kind of, still nice, but it wasn't very heavy.
She said her grandmother was the original. She was authentic.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so I think of and then, even within the spaces of allies, people couldn't understand, what was the big deal of what we wore when we got sworn into office. And, so it's an interesting space to navigate, and there's some interesting dynamics there. Within our Hidatsa culture, the women sit during prayers and the men stand. And so I carried that with me, and I carry it with me in the state legislature. So it was probably about maybe a week and a half into our legislative session, I noticed even the people around me within the party that I'm affiliated with seemed a little uneasy and uncomfortable, until one of them finally, took courage and talked to me about it, like, what is this? And so just explaining that it wasn't silent protest, it was actually carrying who I am and where I come from with me in that space.
So. That's so good. And coming back to leadership, particularly as women of color, because we come from people groups that have been named, right? Savage, or Chinese virus, or violent murderers, or lazy welfare queens, right? Just kind of pick your stereotype, and it's a lot of them, right? Those are the ones that quickly came to mind. And so I think that, showing up, embodying the fullness of who we are and our identity, it's actually one of the ways we glorify God. Right? It's like, we're not making political statements. We're not trying to be politically correct. We're trying to honor God in the ways that he made us, and the families in the communities in the cultures that he birthed us into. And when people take the risk to do what your friend or colleague or ally did, to actually ask questions and to get to know the full you, right? And not just the one that shows up at the office, then we are all better for it. We're all better for it. Kathy, I think you're next up. Mrs. Obama, she spoke about developing a habit, and this is what we're doing tonight, and I hope is a good model for people. Because we talk offline too, right? Like we work and play together. I love working and playing with my friends. So she says she developed this habit that has sustained her through her entire life of keeping close and high-spirited counsel of girlfriends as a safe harbor for female wisdom. So how have you done this in your own life?
This is when technology actually is wonderful, right? So back in the day, you either had to actually talk on a phone that was connected to a wall, and you could only go as far as the cord went. That was the primary way of keeping in touch with my college girlfriends. And I think in every stage of life, similarly to former First Lady Michelle Obama, I'm just gonna she deserves that. She is forever my First Lady.
Come on now.
Right? That there's always a desire and an effort and energy spent in having women and girlfriends to talk to. So like even after this, I'm gonna go and run and have a drink with beverage with two girlfriends.
Right.
And in part because that is the habit, and how I've done it is in every season, guard my time and make it happen. I can specifically think of another group of women. We have gathered together, I think, for 7 years. We are now all married, and we now all have children. We did not all have children when we first started gathering. We span the age. I think myself and one other woman, we are the ones who have like the oldest kids. Every year we get together one full weekend. We've gone from East Coast to West Coast, and we set the date a year in advance, and we tell our families, and we help each other out financially to get there. And we get together. And we have either a book that we're working through together, or we have brought in a spiritual director. We make sure we pray together. We are honest with one another, and then we have fun, right? So we exercise, we go on a walk. I lead them through yoga. We talk about the thing that we enjoy the most, whatever, makeup, skincare, whatever. And then we are honest about how our careers are going, how our spiritual lives are going, how our marriages are going, how raising children is going, and then we set the date for the next year. And that, for me, in this season of teenagers to adulthood, parenting, and career-wise, has been kind of this anchor for me. And then outside of that, like I said, if making friends as a grown woman is hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Like,
yeah.
College is the easiest time. Your freshman year in college is the easiest time. And then after that, it just kind of goes downhill from there. And it takes a lot of vulnerability. And I think particularly as women of color, right, in the context that we're at, and I'm in a very white suburb, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of vulnerability to trust and build that kind of trust and say, am I going to let these people not only into my life, but into my home or into my work or into, all of those things. Yeah. And it takes self-leadership there.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Ruthie one more question. And so for those that are listening on Zoom and on Facebook, now will be the time to get your questions together. I'm going to ask Ruthie a question, and that's what I call her, but she's Representative Buffalo to you. So we're gonna take a quick commercial from our sponsor, and then we're gonna do a few quick announcements, and we're using that time to get you to gather your questions together, because we're gonna come back for the last few minutes of our time together to do some questions. So start doing that now. But I want to ask you, because I think it's important, we haven't touched on this yet. When Michelle Obama was writing about her secondary school experience, where she was bussed out of her neighborhood and into let's just say a better quality school, and in that quality school, because there was white flight in her neighborhood, so basically all the white people start moving out, and when the black people start moving in, and so the public school by her home was not that great of a school, and somehow she was able to go to the school called Whitney Young. And at Whitney Young, she was a minority, but she got an excellent education. And what she communicates there is the exact same feeling I had going to the Naval Academy. Like, I'm like, these people on some other stuff, like they exposed to things, they know things, they're having different conversations than what I have, you know? And so she wrote about her experience at Whitney Young. She said, it gave me a glimpse of something that had previously been invisible. The apparatus of privilege and connection, what seemed like a network of half-hidden ladders, guide ropes that may suspend overhead, ready to connect some, but not all of us, to the sky. And I was like, you better write that. You better. And so I think it's important, especially, you know, all of us are leading in different arenas, but like you said, you come from a situation where the government has done not just your tribe, but your people group a great disservice, like from the very beginning, right? To get into a place where you are now a part of the leadership in that government. And so my question is like, how did you get there? And how can leaders, especially women and people of color, navigate something that is invisible to them?
Oh, I mean, I think back to my childhood, you know, at a young age, I saw something that needed to be fixed, you know, and being a big sister, I kind of, that's the only way I feel like I can understand some of why, how I got to this leadership role today, is just trying to fix things and to prevent further tragedies from happening, you know, so that nobody else has to suffer, basically, in short, you know, because I saw when I was 10 years old, my younger sister, I have 3 younger sisters, and the sister closest to me in age was misdiagnosed with a health condition at our local field clinic in Mandaree. And that was really eye-opening to me because we almost lost her. And so from that point forward, I set out to become a medical doctor, you know, applied to summer institutes of excellence at college campuses, got in, attended that. It was 6 weeks through 7th grade through 12th grade, went on to undergrad as pre-med. But from 8th to 9th grade, I went to a boarding school off of the reservation, and it was a Catholic school. And then I got to go home every weekend, which was nice. So it wasn't far from home. A lot of kids from my community also attended prior to me, like prior generations. And the school closed down. And so a group of us, myself and international students, transferred to this side of the state to a different boarding school, but it was Lutheran. And so this is where I graduated from. And so even within those spaces, I experienced racism. And my outlet was really, you know, I excelled in the classroom, but I also really, my healthy coping mechanism was sports. You know, I was in track, volleyball, basketball.
Track. Yes, track.
Yes. And we were talking about failures too. Like I was slated to take the 1600 meter title my senior year, but I was visiting with a friend. We were both stretching, you know, after we had been in the marshalling area. And so got our lane assignments, and I seen a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. So I was visiting with her, catching up. I look out to the marshalling area and everybody's already down at the start in their lanes. So I book it down there, like that 100 meter, you know, the final 100 meter yards right on that
I do know.
200 curve.
Yes.
Yeah. And so as soon as I get in my lane, the gun goes off and I'm like leading the whole time. And that wasn't my strategy. I usually hung back and then kicked it in the last 200 meters. So in the 1600, my senior year, I didn't take first. I was gassed, at the last 200 meters. And I can't even remember. I know I got a medal or a plaque. I think I placed 5th. It was terrible. So the following day, I had the 800-meter run, and so I won that my senior year. But so yeah, I really excelled in. I excelled off the court, on and off the court, but also just kind of back to the topic of failing and trying to overcome those and learn from those mistakes. But so yeah, back to the original question. I like to tell stories. Sorry, storyteller, I guess. But so yeah, in high school, being in a space where you knew things were different, and after receiving like a hate note in my locker, tried to convince my mom, see now mom, can I come back? We'll have a really good basketball team, I get to play with my cousins, but she still wouldn't budge. And my mom is a very huge advocate for getting a good education and things, and she had told me, no, you're gonna stick it out basically, and you're gonna have to face this when you go on to college, so you might as well overcome it now in your high school years. So how I've navigated these spaces, where you can feel it, sense it, it's something invisible, but it's there even to the pit of your stomach. It's really just staying grounded, spiritually. That's really what has helped me. Even just the strong connection to the land, historically, like you mentioned, a lot of our children were ripped from their homes, and that was during the boarding school era, and in Canada, the residential schools, and so, and as a result of the flood that I mentioned earlier, that flooded 94% of our agricultural land, the place that my grandparents relocated to is called Independence, and their home is still standing to this day, and it was brought up from the bottomlands. But as a result of their new location, they were too far out in the country to get to the new bus line for school. And so they were giving people the option to send their children away to boarding schools an hour south of Fargo. And so my mom went there to this boarding school an hour south of me, which is further away from home than I was when I was in high school. And she was punished. They were punished there for speaking their language, and so I'm not very far removed from those traumas, I guess you could say. And so just really trying to find ways to encourage the younger generation to also overcome and work through those traumas, because why I share that story, the connection to the land, is when I was in high school here in Fargo, when I was missing my family or experiencing things that were invisible, but you knew that they were there. I would actually even just cut across campus. Instead of walking on the sidewalk, I would walk on the grass, just to kind of, that was one way that helped me also stay connected to who I was. And it wasn't to be rebellious and to step on the nice green lawn. It was actually to stay connected to the land. So
we have so much to learn, so much to learn. What I'm going to do, because I want to honor everyone's time, I'm going to thank all of y'all. I'm going to thank our sponsor, and I'm going to show our sponsor video. I'll come back, and I think we can get a few questions in before we wrap. And then we have to do our Leadership Links Creed, because that's what we do before we wrap. So let me do that. So let's see. I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. Again, if you got questions, send them in now. This is your last chance to enter the giveaway. We're going to select a winner tonight and get a gift out to you on tomorrow, hopefully. But we encourage you to visit our customized book store and also follow all of our speakers from tonight on social media, or visit their websites. That'll work as well. Our sponsor, we want to thank InterVarsity Press. They shared a short video with us in why it's important for them to have you read women.
I know that they were publishing women that I admired, who combined all of themselves into a book that was beautiful, that affected transformation, and helped bring forth the gospel. And I wanted to be a part of those women.
They do it with integrity, they do it with openness, and it's such a joy to add my voice into the fabulous voices that are part of InterVarsity Press.
I knew that IVP was a publishing house that not only honored and elevated women, but also honored and elevated people of color. And so as a woman of color, I felt like I could trust IVP to not only honor me as an author, but to honor my words.
I was impressed with IVP's immediate recognition that this was an important topic and this book needed to be out there.
Every individual that I have met or worked with at IVP has been a good human being. And I want good human beings to shepherd my work.
My relationship with InterVarsity Press has gone on for a long time, and for that reason we can do more together. There's a lot of very, very good give and take that we have together that means, I think, that we offer better offerings to the world.
I wanted to work with women. I feel more understood as an author and a theologian, and I feel like I can be freer and less stressed about trying to fit in, trying to adjust and tweak my work, and that's been very liberating for me.
I feel incredibly proud to be part of a press that is so thoughtful, that has a reputation for producing resources that are substantive and can be of real help to the church.
The InterVarsity Press is able to kind of connect the church and the academy, kind of welcome the two different audiences, and not many publishers are able to do that.
There's an integrity that they can maintain, an integrity to the art and craft of writing, and I feel that they've always respected my voice and point of view.
I particularly wanted to author and partner with a publisher that would help me share my voice, my story, my perspective.
IVP is fearless. They are bravely redefining who gets to tell the story.
It's a publishing company that publishes authors that really matter to me.
I mattered before I had a platform, before I had even written a word of the book.
Long before I published with IVP, I was a lover of IVP books.
Regularly, when there's a book that just catches my eye, it turns out to be IVP.
I'm so grateful to be part of the IVP family, and I think that's why I love IVP, because it feels like a family. I think that people are really invested in the work that they do and the authors that they have.
IVP is really driven to publish important and valuable books.
IVP is publishing books that matter. They're publishing books that take risks, that are entering into hard spaces of the conversation about how we navigate issues of identity, of race and class. All of these things drew me to IVP.
So we want to thank InterVarsity Press. Again, reminding you that you can get 40% off of any IVP books right now. And so we want to encourage you to visit their website, and this is the code you can use to do that. And you can also follow them on social media. IVP is present and active on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. I want to invite you to join us for next week's discussion. We're going to continue the book discussion with the section on becoming more. And we have invited some of the friends that we have from the Links Network to join us in that conversation. And we're going to be talking about marriage, and particularly marriage in the Black family, and what education, what role education means in that, in our education and our relationships. And then next month, we'll continue the conversation with Sojourner's Truth, which is very timely for right now. And so we want you to grab that off of the IVP website and join us, and we'll be in discussion with some other fabulous authors to talk about choosing freedom and courage in a divided world. Lastly, you can join us every month, next Saturday, not this Saturday, next Saturday. You can join us for our monthly network prayer call. That's on the third Saturdays of each month. And we would love for you to join us there. Anyone can call in from anywhere at that same time, at the same number every month. I want to show you before we do our questions here about how you can link up with Leadership Links. This is very important for us in this season. There's a few ways you can do that. One, you can go to our website and subscribe to our newsletter at the bottom of the homepage. You can follow us right now and like us on Facebook if you're joining the conversation on Facebook. I want to encourage you to, if you are on Facebook and you haven't registered for the series, to do that. So we have a way for you to register on the website, but if you've already registered, you only need to register once for the entire summer. You only need to register once, and so you don't need to do that again. We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, and we want you to help us tonight by inviting people to follow us on YouTube. We need to get to 100 subscribers there so we can customize our YouTube page, and that will be greatly appreciated. And there are other ways you can link up with us, but for the sake of time, I want to get to some questions. I'm going to invite you to go and explore our website at leadershiplinksinc.org. Okay, let's get a few questions in before we close out with our creed tonight. So let me see if we have any great questions. I think I saw one for Christy. Let's see, where's the question? Kathy, I saw you. Okay, I have a question from our audience. How would you encourage, Kathy, I'm gonna send this one to you. How would you encourage women of color to tell their stories? And they say, thank you all for sharing a bit of your stories with us tonight. Oh, so how would you encourage women to tell their stories?
I think the context of where they are being asked to share their stories matters. So is this a white context that is asking women of color to come in as guests or experts to share their stories? I think that is a different ask than when we are in a space like even here as 4 women of color who know each other to share our stories, trusting the audience to hold those stories well. So for me, I would say, particularly if there are any girls, young women who are watching and listening, write down your stories. And if you're not comfortable writing, you're of the TikTok generation, maybe you're happy to record that, to create something that tells your story that is in a way that is authentic to you. Record that, whether it's in words, whether it's in film, whether it's in dance, whether it's in your paintings, your photographs, record your story. And it does not have to be for public consumption. Mm-hmm. But I would say start there. And then when you're ready to share your story publicly, you do that. When someone invites you to share that and you're ready to share it, you do that. And for those who are asking women of color to share their stories, I would say you are welcome to ask any one of us, but be prepared for us to say no if we're not ready.
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you so much for that, Kathy. I want to ask Christy, we have a question for you. It's actually 2 questions, but they're almost the exact same question framed differently. But in short, these are from white women that are in either teaching Spanish classes or in communities with Latinx communities. And they're asking what can they do to be a bridge or to be a bridge between the divides between the white community and the Latinx community, and any advice that you could give.
Yeah, I love that you're using the language of bridge building as white women, because I think often that language gets used for women of color to bridge towards to bridge towards the white community. So kudos on recognizing bridge goes both ways. So I would say, yeah, cross the bridge and come in, take some steps towards the Latino community. So get to know your neighbors, get to know the people that you're starting to have a relationship with, and start there. I think so often we try to create like a separate event or something else for people to come to. And then we end up not moving towards. And so as white women, I would encourage you to move towards. I know it'll be uncomfortable and hard, and you'll make mistakes, but that would be my first leaning. And then within the white community, to take steps towards educating them in cross-cultural relationships, friendships, things, owning their own identity as whiteness and as white women. What does that mean? What does that look like? To be able to engage well in a different community. I don't know a lot about the communities you're talking about. I read that one is like half white, half Latino. Is it like a gentrifying neighborhood? Is there history and context you need to take into consideration as you try to build bridges or teach Spanish classes? Like what is the story? As we're talking about story, and communities have story, land, like Ruth has been sharing, land has story. So what is the story? So education, moving towards the community, not expecting them to come towards you, or even creating a third space. I think the first step is for, as white women, to move towards. So hope that helps.
Thank you so much. That's very helpful. Ruthie, I'm going to ask you a question because I had one here that we didn't get to, but I want to, and I want you to have the final word before we go to our creed and needs and things. So one of the ways that we work in Leadership Links, especially when we talk about raising up the next generation of leaders, is to expose our young leaders, middle and high school girls, which are mostly Black or brown girls, expose them to career fields where women are traditionally underrepresented in the higher echelons of the leadership. So one of those fields is military and government, right? Like we know that we have a tendency to have more men and the higher roles of leadership in government. I'm going to stop there. So with that being said, what is one of the ways that what set you on that path? Specifically though, I would love for you to answer, how can a young girl prepare? How can she prepare to pursue a career in the government?
Gosh, I would say, because when I was a little girl, I didn't really set out to work in government. I really wanted to help our communities live longer. But I would say if there is a young girl out there who specifically, has a goal in mind to serve in the government, I would say really continue to build a strong foundation in your faith. I think that's so important, to have that solid foundation. And then just be willing to learn, be willing to be a sponge, kind of like be coachable, be willing to make mistakes, but to find ways to find mentors. I kind of think I was a late bloomer in life in terms of student government and things. It wasn't until my third master's degree that I started becoming involved with our student government. And that definitely was not planned to have that many degrees in the master area. But yeah, I was, at KU Med Center, I was involved with our American Indian Health Student Association, and then got invited to a different meeting and got elected in as a senator to represent the Student Governing Council.
It's the life of a woman leader. It's a life of a woman leader. Press on now.
And so, yeah, so I would say, just be patient with yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself, and be willing to learn as much as you can. Seek out mentors. I fell into a internship later in life. When I was in Kansas in 2014, I was a legislative internship for a young Native American woman who is younger than me. And she is a rock star. I mean, North Dakota, we serve 4-year terms. Kansas, everywhere else, I think we're just one of 4 or 5 states that has 4-year terms in our state legislature. But so Representative Ponca Victors, I did an internship for her, and she has been in office, I believe, since 2011. And so, and she's younger than me, so it's really just trying to break through any kind of perceived barriers that you would think would hold you back. So really just continuing to be bold and not doubting yourself. I'm kind of saying all kinds of things, but it's really, there isn't one right path, I would say, to where you want to get.
And the good thing about what you shared here, because like you said, there are many ways to get there. But some things that you said that were very intentional, it actually followed President Barack Obama's model of community organizing or community involvement, right? So you're attentive to what your community needs are. That was one that was very clear. One thing we absolutely are about here is mentorship, right? Finding a mentor, getting a mentor, and sponsorship, because we need that too, right? We need sponsors as well, and educating yourself about the issue or the position or the role or whatever. And then finally, this is the access and opportunity that we always talk about, getting an internship, right? Or volunteering your time somewhere, because what that does, one of our core values at Leadership Links is network. And a lot of times what people of color don't have is social or relational capital. And that can be something that stifles their professional growth or career advancement. And so all of those things were very, very important. So I thank you for sharing them. Thank you all so much for your time. It has been a joy and a pleasure. Everything I had hoped it would be. And so I thank you for that. I invite all of you to join us next week. We're going to close this event like we close all of our physical events with our Leadership Links Creed. And so since you all are not new to me, but you're new to the Leadership Links Network, I'll just read it to you, and I'll read it to our guests, and then we'll wave them bye-bye. But let me share my screen so people who don't know it can see it. Our Leadership Links Creed says that I am Leadership Links, part of a community founded on love, inspiration, network, knowledge, and service. I am never alone in this world. God has strategically placed me in the right place at the right time and connected me to the right people to fulfill the purpose He has for my life. And therefore, I will actively take part in the great work God is doing in the world. I promise to always stand, reach out, and link up. So again, we want to thank you tonight for linking up with us. Thank you. Ladies, we got like 3 minutes. You have any parting words for our guests tonight? All right, well, y'all keep on becoming. We'll see you next Thursday evening, same place, same time. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you again for joining us. Bye-bye.